Chapter 43, 47. Universe 7. In an undetermined place in the Universe 7. Away from all kinds of intelligent life. A huge, muscular, half-naked young man with green hair appeared out of nowhere. Obviously he was Broly, who months earlier had created an ambassadorship there to return to the Universe 7 easily at any time. He didn't have a bioarmor like the Frost Demon or Hit, which allowed them to survive in outer space, but it seemed that the thin green layer of energy that covered him replicated that function. This was a technique that Broly got with his first wish with the Dragon Balls of the planet Earth, and that he continued to perfect over the years, allowing him to stay in perfect conditions in the void of space while he had enough energy. At the same time, he also created a protective barrier around thousands of kilometers similar to that of Babidi, which allowed to hide his ki, in the same way that Babidi did on Earth to hide from the Z warriors and the Kais. It feels good to be in your own universe. Although the Kais of this universe are more inept, and the god of destruction is always sleeping at the most important moments. Whatever, time to collect the fruits that I have sown, but before. Broly brought his hand to his butt and it illuminated intensely and intermittently. Seconds later, the tail that had been cut, and was still in the formless realm for further destruction, or to frame it, grew back. Broly touched his tail from top to bottom and moved it from one side to the other and trained her in different ways. See this cute reference https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=vf9cb2 rai90. When he checked that his tail was in perfect condition, he examined his body. When he found that he was exactly the same as before curing his tail, sighed in relief. Broly hand healed before because he didn't know if having a tail could interfere with his Super Saiyan transformation, since in the canon history nobody had never seen a Super Saiyan with a tail. And while hugging and caressing his tail he said to himself, "Oh, my tail, my beautiful tail, we will never separate again. Your little brother in front felt so alone without you. It was impossible for me to balance. I always decanted slightly forward. Ha ha ha. Well, enough of penis jokes. It is time to test if it is possible to combine the transformations." Broly, still transformed into legendary Super Saiyan full power, started his transformation in True Saiyan. However, contrary to what used to happen with that transformation, his muscles didn't increase, rather the opposite. His muscles began to diminish, in the same way that he also did his size, adopting a similar size but more muscular than he had in his first state of Super Saiyan full power, and his green hair turned black again, and his green juggin lit up with a strange green glow, similar to the blue glow of his right eye. Because the true Saiyan form offered a much stronger body, physical changes such as disproportionate muscle gain and different colored hair didn't occur. As in my theory, however. The power multiplier he had now didn't correspond to the one he theorized. The combat multiplier of the legendary Super Saiyan full power was 24.000, if the true Saiyan multiplied the power by 10. Then the true legendary Super Saiyan full power should be 240.000, but it wasn't like that, it was much less. According to his calculations, this transformation had a multiplier of 15,000. A multiplier much lower than his previous transformation. However, Broly didn't panic, as he understood the reason behind this disappointment. As I theorized, the tail creates incompatibilities with the trigger of the Super Saiyan transformation, and at the same time the transformation True Saiyan creates incompatibilities with the transformation itself. That is why I have returned to my phase of Super Saiyan full power. If I were a normal Super Saiyan, my multiplier would be 500, resulting from the combination of Super Saiyan, 50, and the Oozuru, 10, creating what is known as the Super Saiyan 4. Or as I call him, True Super Saiyan. In Dragon Ball GT, Goku, after some training, adaptation, and the power of the suitability of the script, he managed to multiply his strength in the battle against Omega Shinran, reaching what I believe was the true Super Saiyan 2, 100 by 10. So, even if they are incompatible or rather, difficult to combine, it is possible to reach a higher level. I still have a lot of room for improvement. It's a shame, but I'll need to work hard to combine my transformations. For now it is not as powerful as my legendary Super Saiyan full power, but it allows me other very succulent advantages. Let's test how my two invasions work at the same time. His juggin and right eye shone at once, one with a green light and the other with blue light. Broly in true Super Saiyan full power concentrated his formless realm to the maximum and activated his invasion, as it should be in outer space. However, if someone at hundreds of miles looked in the direction where Broly was, he could appreciate that the light around him seemed to have curved, as if there was a huge gravitational field around him that subtly deformed it. At the same time, it seemed as if the image of Broly had frozen, as if it was paused, or at least that's what it looked like. It wasn't Broly who was paused, but the time around him. So it looked like if he didn't move for the outsiders, even if he was the only one not affected by that slowing down of time. This was the ability Broly used to face hit during his long fight on Sadala planet to increase gravity, transformed into true Saiyan. At the same time, this was also the ability that Broly used to face hit and Kampa to slow down the time when he was transformed into Super Saiyan. This is his ability, Invasion, which varied in effect depending on the transformations that were active. Or rather, the realm that he had activated, which were reflected in his eyes. Invading with his different realms the dimensions that superimpose it, imposing its laws on those same ones. Each eye represents a realm. Each realm represents an aspect of reality that Broly can control in his dimensions. Every aspect of that reality can be manifested in the normal world through a different transformation. Each transformation is reflected in the eyes of Broly as a glare of different color. Each color represents a different effect that you can use with Invasion. The first realm that Broly created was the formless realm which resided in his Jugon. Before formless realm there wasn't thing, until space was created as the first proof of its existence. Since the only thing that existed in the real formless was space, and that Broly's first transformation was the true Saiyan. Transformed into true Saiyan and with a green glow in his Jugon. Could activate Invasion. Broly with these conditions is able to impose the space laws of his formless realm and control the space around him, and those impositions were in all the dimensions close to him, including Hit Dimension. Among many of the skills he could use with this skill, the most characteristic and used was his passive ability, which allowed to increase the gravity using the manipulation of space. According to this theory, gravity is caused by a curvature in space. These curvatures occur mainly when an object with a large enough compressed mass exists in space. This curvature will cause objects with a mass and speed lower than this object to be trapped within that gravitational field. With this, Broly was able to increase that curvature by imposing it on the space around him, increase the gravity depending on how much he concentrated his formless realm. The maximum possible that could increase was the gravity to which Broly has been able to support for 9 minutes or more. Before reaching Universe 6, the maximum he reached was 900 times Earth's gravity, being the only one not affected by that condition. The second realm that Broly created was the Form Realm, which he created in the 2 years he spent in the hyperbolic time chamber. In that time, Broly, using the information obtained with the magical abilities that he had obtained, the investigation on the time machine of Dr. Amori and to the temporary difference that existed inside the room. Broly was able to create a realm where he had absolute control of time, although for certain conditions, such as not having obtained his Super Saiyan, he hadn't yet been able to enter, despite being his absolute master and creator. The invasion ability of this realm was activated by the use of the S cells, or rather, in the Super Saiyan state, reflected in his right eye as a blue glow. The Form Realm, using the Formless Realm as a medium, projected the temporal abilities to the outer dimensions to impose his laws. The passive ability of this skill was to slow down the time depending on the concentration of the Formless Realm, even stopping it completely. The slowdown depends mainly on the concentration and power of the person within the area. It wasn't necessary to fully concentrate the Formless Realm to completely stop the time of someone like King Sadala, while it was necessary to concentrate it to the maximum to slow down Kampa a bit, while it had no effect on Vados. Both passive abilities, despite having their differences, both used the concentration of Formless Realm to impose their laws on the dimensions on which they have contact. Something similar to the pressure exerted by water on living beings when they dive. Great. I'll have to work harder on my other dimensional skills. Another one of my many things to improve. However, this transformation, despite having less power, for now, with these skills may be more interesting than the legendary Super Saiyan full power transformation that I will also have to improve. I have so much to do. Good luck, I have time to spare before Saga Z begins. Broly said as he pushed back his invasions, extinguishing that brightness in his 2 of 3 eyes. Broly moved away a little more towards the emptiness, stopped emitting energy disproportionately, and after verifying that there was no one around him, he opened his hands, and in front of him 7 orange objects of planetary size with red stars in their interior appeared instantaneously. Wow, I've released a lot of space in my formless realm. It's like when I emptied my hard drive of pornography in the previous life. Hahaha. It is better to hurry with my wish, before someone realizes that I have stolen the Super Dragon Balls, the Dragon Balls capable of granting any wish. Let begin. Broly, in the language of the god, said, Super Shinran, come out and grant me my wish, Chanmug. A few seconds later, the red stars began to glow brightly, and they moved, placing themselves in an hexagonal way with the 4-star Dragon Ball in the middle. After that the Dragon Ball began to shine with an impressive force, they seemed to shine as much as a supernova. From that explosion of light appeared a titanic dragon with a pure yellow color with a gold tone on his body. He has bright crimson eyes, large bat wings instead of the feathery ones around the species he has been designed from, coincidentally has no legs, and spikes around his tail. He is incomprehensibly large, shown to be many times more colossal than the multiple amount of galaxies between universes 6 and 7. This was the Super Shinran, without question the largest and most powerful eternal dragon in the entire Dragon Ball saga. Broly impressed by the great visual spectacle and imposing appearance of the Super Shinran. Wow, this is real fucking dragon, and not the lizard of the earth, although it lacks some muscle. Whatever. Super Shinran. My wish is. Author. Sorry for not being able to publish a daily chapter, but it is being impossible. Lately I don't have time. To give you an idea. I leave home at 7 AM and I return from work at 9 PM. And I have to prepare dinner, do things at home and prepare the work for the next day. These weeks are being difficult. My wish is to be able to create my own Dragon Balls, and almighty Dragon Balls like yours that only answer before me. Dragon Balls on which only me can have authority over them and their desires. That not even God Zalama can do anything about them. Let them be my own absolute power and nobody else's, said Broly to the huge Super Shinran. Moments later Super Shenron's red eyes lit up, signal that he was fulfilling his wish, and instantly Broly realized that something had changed inside him. He had gained a new power, and the necessary information about how to use it. Finally. I have finally achieved it. After fulfilling the wish, Super Shinran among a great multitude of lights, introduced himself again into the Super Dragon Balls, which were dispersed again between universes 6 and 7. After fulfilling his wish, Broly, who was a foresight person, left the scene of the crime. Although no one found Zamasu fulfilling his wish, you can't be 100% sure if anyone could have seen you. Planet Earth. Broly Island. Broly appeared in the air, in the living room of his beautiful and futuristic island. He teleported right into his favorite chair, where he practically fused against the mattress, and with his eyes closed as if he were about to sleep he said, "Finally. I've finally achieved it, and in record time, the most important step of my plan has been fulfilled." Why did Broly ask for this wish? Broly from the beginning, even from before reincarnating, always wanted to have in his arsenal the ability of a reality warping. A power that would allow him to alter reality at will, which would allow him to do the stand the world above heavens. Stand that he couldn't get because of a certain god. Broly's first thought when he thought about the wish he was going to ask to the Super Dragon Balls was an unlimited and almighty reality warping. When he asked his wish for knowledge to the normal Shinran, he changed his mind. He realized by the knowledge he received that no matter how powerful the reality warping of the Super Dragon Balls was, they couldn't grant a reality warping superior to the one they have. Things like ask for all the wishes, the unlimited wishes that I want, whenever I want without conditions or limitations. It wasn't possible, unless you want to limit the power and reach. In fact, in case he asked to have a reality warping, the desire that Super Shinran would grant him would be to have the ability to create Super Dragon Balls. For that reason, he preferred to specify in more detail the characteristics that those Dragon Balls should have. For years I haven't used the Dragon Balls for almost nothing. Not because I had forgotten, not because I am extremely humble or because I didn't have useful desires to ask. Wishes such as improve myself at different levels. I haven't done it because it wouldn't be my power. It wouldn't be very different from borrowing a power from another person. Do I know if they can take it from me in any way? Do I know if I could control it as if it were really mine? Do I know if I can improve it? No. I don't want to modify my body or powers if that modification hasn't been by myself or by an extension of my power, as are my Dragon Balls. It may be pride, it may be arrogance, but my power should only belong to me. In addition, it is something extremely necessary for the future. Broly, after resting for a while in his favorite chair while his other clone with 1% of his power joined him, forming again the 100% Broly. He got up and went outside to a training area made of Kaioshin, like almost the entire island. Island that was covered with Kaioshin to resist any possible attack, or training, with a protective barrier that has the purpose of preventing anyone with a low level of power from entering, and making it impossible for anyone to see what it was there inside, especially Kami. The first impulse of anyone would be to create the Dragon Balls, but I am not like others. The greater the power of the creator, the greater the power of the Dragon Balls. First of all, my potential power is infinite, and whenever I become stronger the Dragon Balls will become more powerful too, but it is better to start from the best possible point, so now that I have reached my Super Saiyan, I have fulfilled the conditions to unlock my next transformation in the easiest way. It's time to become an underaged god. In manga, film and anime, we have seen two ways in which a Saiyan can archive divine ki. 1. Train hard under the supervision of a superior entity such as a powerful and mysterious effeminate baby sister angel, as Vegeta did for months. 2. Through the ritual which requires 5 righteous Saiyans to perform and a 6th Saiyan to channel the ritual and ki into, where the 6 righteous Saiyans must hold hands in a circle and transfer their ki into the Saiyan who is becoming the Saiyan God. There were 2 options, however. Broly had several problems. He didn't have at his disposal a generous angel trainer who wanted to train him for free. And he preferred not to have it for now, to be able to keep certain secrets, not overly change the story, and above all and not have to depend too much on another. He wanted to surprise them when they found he was God. He also didn't have 5 Saiyans at his side to perform the ritual. So he should wait several years until Goku, Vegeta, or he reproduced or go to the planet Sadala of Universe 6 to recruit them for this task, but as with the Dragon Balls, he wanted that power to be his from the beginning, without having to depend on anyone. Besides, he didn't want to wait so long. Broly certainly had it very difficult to complete his objectives with the conditions that he had imposed himself. It seemed impossible. Those are the rules to become Super Saiyan God, but I have never followed the rules. I use the conditioner and then the shampoo. I travel on the train with my mobile in airplane mode. I put the plants indoors on the terrace. Etc. Etc. I'm a bad boy. I was born to break the rules, I am a rebel. Broly transformed into Super Saiyan and immediately created 5 clones, which were put in the same position in which the ritual of ascension to Super Saiyan God should take place. He was planning to perform the ritual with himself and copies. Normally this would be impossible to work, since 5 different Saiyans are required. Or rather, 5 different keys from Saiyans. Broly's idea was to modify the signature of his life energy in each of their bodies to make them look like different people. This is the same strategy he used in his younger days to download different movies with Megaupload at the same time, avoiding the waiting time between film and film, changing my IP address. Broly made several attempts in which he tried to find the correct frequency. It was the first time he tried to do something similar to that, and of course it wasn't being simple. In addition, he was finding it very ridiculous to make a circle holding hands with his own clones. Something that deconcentrated him at times. There wasn't much success, until blue aura appears around the group, shrouding each Broly in the ritual. Then a yellow flame-like beam was emitted from the group. This was divine energy. The divine energy shoots up into the sky, and golden-colored clouds start to emerge and began to spread across the blue sky, eventually covering it completely after a few minutes. The sea changed into a golden hue as well, becoming violent and forming huge whirlpools. At this moment, the original Broly experienced a significant amount of pain. After this, a blue aura starts to appear from every Broly and eventually transferred it into the original body, who is about to become God through the other 5 clones. After this, another beam shoots up from the original Broly, which causes some of the clouds to dissipate and leave an enormous hole. The weather changed over and over in a matter of seconds, changing from rain, to hail, to a thunderstorm, to clear, during which a few days appear to pass, to snow, and clear again. When the climatic change is finished, the figure of Broly that floated in the air surrounded by a red aura that didn't allow to see his silhouette, dissipated. And when that aura was dissipated, Broly appeared. His appearance had changed once more. His hair had turned a color between red and orange without bristling in the least, despite being in his Super Saiyan transformation. His muscle mass had decreased, making him more defined. His eyes become more detailed and the irises become red, but not a violent red. They transmitted in great tranquility. The overall body structure appears to be younger and thinner in frame and build, which was a lot to say for a boy of just 10 years old. His aura looked like a furious fire dancing around him. And his left eye lit up with a strange red glow too. Broly had managed to achieve the transformation of Super Saiyan God on his own. In addition, because the transformation was achieved on its own, unlike with Goku, He didn't need to absorb it or make it his own, as happened in the fight against Beerus, to ensure that the SSG wasn't a temporary and external transformation of which it is necessary the help of 5 other Scions. Broly having created this transformation on his own and being all those keys used for the ritual of his property. The transformation itself also became part of himself. Broly in a single movement, in less than half an hour, had achieved what Goku and Vegeta had both suffered too much. He had obtained divine energy and at the same time, his first divine transformation. Wawawawahawa. Achievement unlocked, fuck, I'm a fucking genius. My god. I mean. Me. This transformation, it's so different from all the other transformations I've had. It is as if you were in another plane of existence. Is this what a god feels all the time? Well, a real god, not the Kais who are so weak that they are incapable of fighting against minimally trained mortals. Awesome. Not only has my ki improved exponentially, but my nen has done it. It's as if the restrictions I have imposed on myself so far are more lax and the advantages more generous. Among other things, he realized that the restriction of only being able to enter 1/3 of his body had changed. Now he could introduce half of his body. I was wrong at first with my SSG theories. Actually, I'm in my Super Saiyan form right now. However, due to the extreme relaxation that this energy gives me, my hair hasn't needed to stand up, but it has changed color due to the excess of aura. At first I believed that my body was strong enough so my hair wouldn't change color, but it seems that the divine energy works differently from the normal. It is too dense and my body need to manifest externally this kind of dense aura, the combination of my S cells and divine energy. Incredible, my power is overwhelming. I don't know what exactly the power improvement of the SSG is, since there has been no official information about it. But there is no doubt that mine is exceedingly superior to that of Goku and Vegeta. Only this transformation is superior to the legendary Super Saiyan full power several times. Fuck, if I add my true Saiyan to this. My Super Saiyan full power. My legendary Super Saiyan full power and the other transformation I'm speculating. I don't know what power I would be able to reach. This is crazy. Calm. This is now impossible. I will need a lot of training. There are too many incompatibilities, especially for being the legendary Super Saiyan that depends exclusively on anger. There is still one thing left to do. By saying that Broly disappeared completely, he had teleported once more into his dimension. Broly was ready to complete his last realm. Broly appeared again inside his formless realm. The first realm that Broly created, which had the Jugon as his origin. The formless realm, the green dimension where only space exists and there is no time except for its creator. A dimension whose maximum size was delimited by the N of Broly and whose current size was delimited by the amount of space created by his self-imposed process of creation of 1 cubic meter for every 10,000 of fighting power in the form of energy sent. The main dimension from which Broly either actively, passively based his abilities. Broly floated placidly by his enormous and practically empty dimension, looking from one side to another all the objects that had been introduced inside. Objects that remained in the same conditions as when they were introduced in the realm. The samples that he had obtained, Kaioshin constructions and other household appliances and products, his beloved Kid 2.0 spaceship, the tens of thousands of senzu beans, food fresh from the oven still hot, that was cooked months ago. Among them, of course, were Hit and the Frost. Broly, as if he were swimming in back style, went to the two of them and with a mocking tone said, "Don't worry. I will let you out of here very soon, more or less." After observing his trophies, Broly teleported to another location of Formless Realm at a very specific location, in front of a very specific item. It was a huge sculpture of over 1,000 meters made entirely of Kaioshin and covered with a strange glass urn, a sculpture of a colossal, violent and majestic dragon that seemed to want to eat the whole existence. An impossibly humongous, vaguely humanoid dragon with many horns, a massive scary head on its chest, many massive wings, arms ending with claws similar to the giant head in his chest, and a very long serpentine body that seemed to have no end. An aspect extremely similar to Shin Baruan Baozakuruga of Kanjiki no Gash Bell. But more refined and without electric beams, and with a third eye on the forehead, like his creator. This is the model with which Broly wanted to create his eternal dragon. Huge, awesome, powerful and muscular. Yes, muscular, someone like me wouldn't create a skinny dragon. The muscles are masculinity. For years in the manga and anime, even in Dragon Ball Super, muscular characters have stopped appearing, characters that were always present decades ago and are now scarce. However, all the virile men love those muscular and badass characters and crave to see them. The clear example of this is Nanatsu no Taizai. We all love the rough moments of Meliodas and Ban, strong, masculine, with a great personality, background, skills and physical power. Great characters that have been developed at all levels for dozens of chapters, but Escaner-sama appears for the first time a few seconds and everyone loses their heads due to an virility overload. That's why Broly, I'm so loved by the audience, that's why I'm the villain with the most films of all. Yes, Broly existed. I've even become canon because of popular demand. Muscles forever. I leave this funny reaction to the opening 3 of Nanatsu no Taizai. It's in Spanish, but the message is clear. Rolling on the floor laughing, rolling on the floor laughing, rolling on the floor laughing. https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=CEC3Z0OGHUM. Broly with his telekinesis moved the sculpture of the dragon to follow him behind, and after observing it for a little longer, proud of his work as a sculptor, he said, "I still cannot go inside, but I want to see my precious form realm again." Broly from his formless realm directed his gaze to another place, another dimension. A huge white and empty dimension with a large palace in the center of it, very similar to the hyperbolic time chamber, since he took it as a reference the 2 years that he waited inside to create it, although he couldn't use it for now. A white dimension that seemed to have no end, although it has. The maximum size of this dimension corresponds to the total size of Broly's end, which was huge. So huge that it practically covered the entire Universe 7, in the case of reaching the end of the dimension you will appear on the opposite side. A dimension in which time passed differently, perfect for training, even more perfect for training than the hyperbolic time chamber itself. Although with other inconveniences quite limiting for Broly, like the one of not being able to enter yet. Damn. Why would it put such absurd conditions? Well, I probably put them in this way to avoid becoming a lone wolf, to force me to socialize. I hoped that with my divine energy it would be possible to avoid my own bureaucracy, but I see that it's impossible, as expected of me. When I say NO is NO. For good or bad. Well, for now I don't need this dimension either. If something I have to spare is time. Broly stopped paying attention to the form realm reflected in his right, since he couldn't do anything within that dimension now and there was no excessive need to do so. Instead, he noticed the dimension of his left eye, the other dimension that until now hadn't even been able to release. He hadn't been able to travel to her, he hadn't been able to develop it, he hadn't even been able to establish the laws of his invasion. However, that was going to change very soon. Broly next to the statue of the monstrous dragon of which he prided so much, both appeared in the void of space. In an infinite void where you couldn't see anything at all, there wasn't the slightest light coming from a distant star, there was no kind of matter nearby. There wasn't the slightest trace of life or existence, it was impossible to detect any key type or presence. It was as if nothing existed in that universe. It seemed so because it was precisely what was happening, there was nothing in that universe except Broly and his sculpture. Because they weren't in the Universe 7, they were in the brand new realm of Broly. A dimension of infinite size, which represented his unlimited power. Finally, my last realm. I need to furnish it, but it's quite cozy. Broly breathed strongly with his arms open and said with satisfaction, "It smells new." Moments after speaking alone and satisfying himself of his achievements, he turned to his statue. Broly transformed, into his most powerful transformation to date. The true Super Saiyan God. The union between true Saiyan, Super Saiyan and Saiyan God. The aspect of this transformation was a less muscular true Saiyan with the fur that covered his body in a fire red color, the same color that would also have his hair, tail and eyes. Then he put his two hands in front of the statue covered by the crystalline sphere, and his hands began to shine while reciting a strange spell in the language of the gods, which was a bit long and absurd. When the spell ended, from the hands of Broly appeared golden rays that went towards the statue. The statue that was being saturated with those rays of light began to shine intensely. The brightness intensified every second, until the statue reached the limit and created an overwhelming light explosion that illuminated the vacuum of space. When that explosion of light subsided, the dragon statue inside the crystal sphere disappeared. However, that statue hadn't disappeared, it had been transformed. Or rather, it had come to life. In the immensity of that empty dimension, a huge humanoid dragon with different faces, bigger than several galaxies put together, was born. Despite having increased its size several billions of times, its imposing and intimidating appearance remained the same, the only thing that changed was its color. The base of his body was made of a mixture between golden and greenish color, his fangs were reddish and the rest of wings and pikes were of a bluish and greenish color. Broly looked at the sky in the direction of his new creation and with tears in his eyes, spectacular. I think I am going to cry. I always wanted my own dragon. Buah. Buah. Bua. From now on you will be called Acnologia. Why? Because I love that name. Acnologia opened his arms and began to shine uncontrollably until that shine completely enveloped his titanic body. Moments later that brightness was divided into 7 titanic rays of light, which were scattered throughout Broly dimension. Great! Broly was able to see that within those huge rays of light there were spherical objects made of cat chin, spherical objects with the size of a small planet. Those were his own Dragon Balls in a dormant state. My Dragon Balls are huge too, they are not as big as the Super Dragon Balls yet, but they will grow. The bad thing is that I'll have to wait a fucking year until I can ask for my wish. Hahaha, doesn't matter. I can wait. Now I have my own unlimited universe with my own Dragon Balls of almost unlimited power for me alone. And the best thing is that no one will know. Also, since this is my universe, I have absolute control and I can pick them up whenever I want without even moving a finger. Saying that, 7 planetary objects appeared around Broly, they were the 7 sleeping Dragon Balls that he had created a few moments ago. Hahaha. With this my desire realm is inaugurated. And with this, my 3 realms are finally complete. The first realm of all, formless real. Where space was created from nothing. Space, the first dimension that contains all reality, where objects are found with width, height and depth in a relative position and direction, from which events will unfold. The realm of the neither existence nor non-existence, where there is space that contains the objects that will create the events, but not the time that allows those events to have history. Place where only the creator God above all else exists. Realm that represents the power of his creators over space. The second realm, the form realm. After creating the 3-dimensional space, which can be perceived and measured by mortals, a 4th dimension was created, the time that can be measured, but not perceived by mortals. Time, the dimension that contains the separation and the duration of events within a space. Giving continuity to reality. The form realm is the place to which only a select few have access. Gods among mortals for whom time becomes eternal in that dimension. Realm that represents the power of his creators over time. The third and last realm, the desire realm. With the existence of the space that contains and places the objects that will develop the events that make up reality, and the time that contains the separation and duration of events. Events that can develop, thus creating causality. The cause and the effect produced by those events that take place in a specific space and time. The desire realm, called in this way by the desires and motivations of the beings that inhabit the universe that unleash the cause and the effect. It is an infinite universe consisting of normal space and time where those who inhabit it exist and develop their existence in a normal way. Realm that represents the power of its creator over cause and effect. These are Broly's 3 realms. His own dimensions on which he was the absolute God and with which he could impose his laws on other nearby dimensions. Broly made a clone of himself and one of them left the Desire Realm to Universe 7, while the other remained in the Desire Realm. Years ago I rebuilt an island. Now I have the challenge of furnishing stars, planets, and life a whole infinite universe. It will take many years. But there is still a little something I need to do before finishing my big project. Universe 7. Planet Earth. A wild Broly appeared in a desert place on planet Earth, an inhospitable place with hardly any vegetation in which there were only rocks and sand. A very characteristic scenario of Dragon Ball Z to have definitive battles with bad guys. Which meant that the planet Earth wasn't yet overly populated, and that our Z warriors were careful not to cause collateral damage in their battles. Broly walked calmly through this desert landscape, until he reached a specific point, where he stopped. Well, the most appropriate moment has arrived. I knew where you were from the first moment that my end covered this planet. But until now I hadn't had the power to control you completely, and to use your abilities at my will. But now that I have completed my 3 realms and my knowledge of magic has reached a good level. The moment to acquire you has arrived. Majin Buu. Broly transformed into true Super Saiyan God made his Jugon light up with a greenish color, proof that he was performing his space invasion in that area to teleport an object hidden underground. Moments later, in front of Broly appeared a big spheric purple cocoon with vein-like bulges on it. That was the cocoon where Majin Buu was sealed in by Bibidi 5 million years ago. 5 million years ago, Bibidi sealed Buu in this cocoon and left him in planet Earth when it was difficult to control him. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Shin killed Bibidi, and as the irresponsible and incompetent god that he is, he left the Majin Buu sealed on the planet Terra so that millions of years later, Babidi, the doppelganger of Bibidi, brought him back to life with the help of Gohan, Goku, and Vegeta, who acted as true irresponsibles as well. While Broly watched the huge purple cocoon, thanks Shin, your uselessness as Kai will benefit me a lot. What to do? I could absorb him directly into my formless realm, then move him to the desire realm and wake him in there to carry out my experiments, but that would make it less interesting. Besides, it's been a while since I gave him a joke, he said, trying to contain his laughter. Broly approached the huge cocoon of Majin Buu and undid his transformation from True Super Saiyan God to simply True Super Saiyan, and began channeling energy into the cocoon. He was trying to awaken the terrible Majin Buu, the final and most powerful enemy of Dragon Ball Z 29 years before he should awaken in the official history. Broly had dispensed with his divine phase because, as in Dragon Ball Z, the divine energy of Shin or Kibito didn't work to awaken Buu. A mortal key was necessary, so Broly was forced to use an inferior transformation. Broly was slowly introducing his energy according to the indications that normal Shinran gave him when he asked for his first wish, elevating his power level more and more, so much so that a certain person noticed. In Kami's palace, Mr. Popo was doing his cleaning tasks, while Kami was walking around Silankuan on the edges of the temple making his usual patrol to observe what was happening in his world. Since Broly left, everything is so quiet. No jokes, no frights, no surprises, and the planet are not in danger of disappearing. Everything is as it should be. Kami said, relaxing placidly in his robotic chair while a tear escaped his eyes for the happiness of that moment. However, that joy didn't last long, since he had perceived an immeasurable energy in a certain location of the planet. An energy so immense that he didn't think it was possible for a living being to contain it, but he immediately noticed that energy he had felt it somewhere before. This cannot be true. Broly has returned and has become more powerful. What's he doing? Kami, accompanied by Mr. Popo, who had also noticed that immeasurable energy, approached one end of the platform, which hid an evil and terrifying presence. So terrifying that Kami and Popo were trembling with fear. What does Broly intend to do with that? Kami said as he got out of the robotic chair. Kami continued watching as Broly continued to supply energy to that terrifying cocoon, which was beginning to beat and to expel white smoke from its base. The cocoon every time beat faster and expelled a greater amount of white smoke from its base. The energy contained was getting bigger and its malice became increasingly solid and deep. And proportionally increased concern and fear of Kami. However, all their fears reached a point of no return when that strange cocoon hatched, splitting in half. A pink smoke was coming out into the atmosphere. To his relief, it seemed that the cocoon was empty, there wasn't thing inside, but, looking up, he realized that the pink smoke had concentrated in the sky and had formed a cloud. A cloud that was once gathering and taking shape, until it materialized completely. Forming the fat Majin Buu. A strange being with pink skin, an antenna on top of his head with 3 steam holes on each side, clothed in a purple cape, and a black vest with golden trims. He wears yellow gloves and boots with white baggy pants, also a black belt with a golden belt buckle with the demon mark. He was the Majin Buu that appeared for the first time in Dragon Ball Z. After materializing Buu, with his typical face of happiness and big chubby cheeks that covered his eyes, he looked around and began to do some warm-ups, probably to get minimally in shape after sleeping for more than 5 million years. Once he stopped doing his warm-ups, he started to play in a childish way, doing cartwheels, walking around with his leg or circling around him and applauding himself, ignoring Broly, who had become True Super Saiyan God once again. Seeing the harmless appearance and behavior of Buu, Kami relaxed a bit, believing that he had exaggerated again. Well, it doesn't seem as terrible as I thought. He's just playing, maybe he's not a threat. I thought the same about Broly, maybe I shouldn't trust appearances. I have become too distrustful with the years. Kami tried to reassure himself, since the situation didn't seem as catastrophic as he believed at first, until... This is a tragedy. A tragedy. We're finished. Shout behind Mr. Popo and Kami desperately, a rather familiar voice. It was none other than our dear Broly, who had come to visit his 2 dear friends to give them good news. Hi. Shouted Mr. Popo and Kami, who were shocked by Broly's words, but also by seeing him here, since a few moments ago he was on the other side of the world, and as they were checking he was still there. He hadn't moved at all on the side of that fat and pink being. Are you Broly? Mr. Popo said, trying to understand the strange situation that was happening in front of him. Yes. I'm a Broly clone created to do household chores and study an online engineering career, but that doesn't matter now. We are facing a great catastrophe. Broly shouted, while he shook Cammy by the shoulders. Cammy, shocked by the fear that Broly was showing, asked, is the great danger that strange pink being? Yes. By mistake I have freed the terrible Majin Buu by supplying him with my energy. It is a monster that has existed for millions of years, a practically immortal and invincible being that only exists to destroy, and that over the years was absorbing the evil elements of mankind, becoming steadily more violent. It is a fucking killing machine, not even the Supreme Kais could do anything against him. Now he's free on planet Earth. And he sure wants to destroy the whole galaxy. Broly shouted, shaking Cammy's shoulders harder. Cammy, as he was shaken, his green color was turning pale and dripping cold sweat, as he understood the seriousness of the matter when hearing about the Supreme Kais. Even the Supreme Kais couldn't do anything against him? He said, stammering by the panic that was growing inside him. Yes. They couldn't do anything against him. That monster devoured 2 of them and killed 2 others, leaving only one that was saved for hiding. Everything is over. This is the end. Cried Broly like a crazy bitch. Cammy, who had fallen in panic, and full of anger which he directed towards Broly, and rightly, asked while shaking him also from the shoulders, if you knew all this. Why the hell have you resurrected Shamai? Why did you do it? Why? Broly, still shaking him off the shoulder, said with the same hysterical intensity. There was a sign that said, don't touch, and another, don't supply energy to the Kaken. What did you expect me to do? I am a 10-year-old boy. It was as if they provoked me to do it. I had no other choice. Cammy, on hearing that excuse, was about to be dismayed by fear, anger, and helplessness, and in fact if it weren't for the constant jolts of Broly that would be the result, but that was the beginning of his terror. He's going to kill us all, we'll all suffer countless tortures, but especially you, Cammy. Broly said as he pretended that his legs weren't working properly due to fear. Hey! Why me? Said Cammy, who really didn't work his legs properly due to his fear. Why? It's the fucking Majin Buu. He loves kill gods. Whatever their rank is. He will come here and torture you, sodomize you, he will turn you into his little whore, and then he will eat you alive while he laughs. You will suffer a lot. So much that you would wish to die in the first second of the many hours in which he will be torture with you. We are done. Everyone. But above all you. He cried desperately, being this the best tragic performance of his life. Upon hearing all this story, feel the immeasurable energy that the Majin Buu had and the evil he felt coming from him before birth. Cammy began to have an anxiety attack. His already pale skin turned completely white with certain bluish tones, the antennae retracted completely, he almost looked like a frost demon. His pupils went blank while he muttered incomprehensible words, until he fainted, falling against the floor. UPS. I think that this time my joke has gone too far. I didn't see him from so long ago, that I wanted to make a good joke to commemorate our good moments. Cammy is becoming too sensitive. Cammy-sama. A pale Mr. Popo shouted as he ran to help the fainted Cammy and lamented for fate the planet Earth and all its inhabitants. Bazinga. You have been victims of another of my classic jokes. Ha 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 ha. Said Broly, writhing with laughter on the floor. Mr. Popo, with his body frozen and burning with fury at the same time, looked at Broly wanting to kill him, but immediately calmed down while attending to Cammy, and losing all the desire to lecture him, he asked, so that Majin Buu is not so dangerous? Oh, that wasn't a joke, he is extremely dangerous. But compared to me he is nothing. I'll finish him. Ha 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 ha. You should see what face you put. In fact, I've recorded it in a video. Look, Mr. Popo, said Broly while showing a movie in which Cammy was fainting. Majin Buu was still jumping around the field, happy and energetic to have left the ball without anyone giving him orders, when suddenly. Hey! You! Fucking fat bastard with a stupid face. I'm here! Shouted the true Super Saiyan God Broly with a mocking voice. Majin Buu, on hearing those insults, stopped acting in a childish way. Instead, he turned his gaze to where Broly was and opened his eyes with fury. What did you say? What did you say? Fat Majin Buu, furious by the insult and blowing smoke from his forehead, waved his arms in protest and disapproval towards Broly. I called you fucking shitty fatso. Apart from being ugly, are you deaf too? Broly said in an offensive way to anger Buu. Fat Buu, upon hearing those insults and humiliations, clenched his fists and teeth as he glared at Broly. I'm going to kill you, he said as he expelled a lot of smoke from all the holes in his body. Broly, with his arms crossed and with a defiant attitude, said, you and how many more? Fucking pig. Come here, retarded. I'll make you even uglier than you are now. Due to the rage, Buu was shedding a lot of smoke, so much that it was difficult to see him. Boom. Buu, who had never been insulted in such a brutal way in his life, could no longer contain his rage and threw himself at Broly with all his strength, quite the opposite of what he always did. He usually played with his adversary before cruelly killing him. Buu was about to hit Broly, but his image became blurry, that Broly was just an afterimage. Pam! I'm here, fat ball, said Broly, who appeared behind Buu, and slapped him so hard that he made his neck turn 3,240 degrees. Palm! And here too, said Broly once more as he teleported his right leg and kicked him in the ass, sending Buu, with the neck twisted, several meters away, destroying all the rocks in his path. After a few seconds, Buu got up and repaired his twisted neck and dented ass. Then he slapped himself on his cheeks and said, you are very strong. I know, thanks for highlighting something so obvious. Come here, chubby. I will not move, said Broly, provoking him with the movements of his hand, telling him to attack. Buu became angry again due to Broly's provocation and started to release smoke again. However, he didn't act impulsively. Given that Broly had said he wouldn't move, Buu seized the opportunity, and raising his hand he began to create a pink energy sphere, a sinister sphere of energy that seemed to have enough power to destroy the entire planet. You said you wouldn't move, so, take this, Buu said, throwing his most powerful destructive technique. Broly watched passively as the planet-destroying sphere fell away from Buu's hand. I said that I would move, but... I never said you wouldn't, he said sarcastically as his Jugun lit up with a green light. Space invasion, shambles. At that time, Buu, and the energy sphere that he had just thrown, exchanged positions, with which his energy sphere was now right behind him. Eh? Buu said as he stared at his surroundings, wondering, not understanding what had happened. He didn't remember being in that position and his energy sphere had disappeared. Pum. Ah. Before he could realize it, his own energy sphere hit him in the back, and he was being devoured by her. While Buu was fighting to not be destroyed by his own attack, Broly gave him a little help. Mini Omega Blaster. Broly threw a small green energy sphere into the energy sphere created by Buu, making it explode. Boom. When the smoke from the explosion subsided, the only thing that could be seen on the floor were a bunch of pieces of pink flesh that had once been Majin Buu. In the eyes of anyone who didn't know him, it would seem that this monster had died, but that was because they didn't know anything, because moments later these pieces of pink flesh began to gather, until Majin Buu materialized again. Oh! Spectacular, seeing this live is awesome. Broly said, clapping sarcastically. What have you done? Why did my attack hit me? Buu said, annoyed by the attitude of Broly, who wasn't surprised or frightened, and because he hadn't understood how his attack had reached his back. As much as I told you, you wouldn't understand, you're too stupid, said Broly, mocking and telling him to attack again. Buu once again blew smoke through all the holes in his body like a teapot. I'm tired of you making fun of me. Buu stopped playing and rushed towards Broly with his two fists in the air at maximum speed, avoiding releasing an energy attack for what had happened seconds ago. Broly True Super Saiyan God without moving from the place where he originally said he wouldn't move. He made his right eye light up with a blue color and activated his passive time invasion skill and shouted. The world. At this moment the time around Broly stopped completely, including the one of Buu, who remained in stop time floating in the air with his fists in high in the direction of Broly. At this moment Broly took out a permanent marker from his formless realm and teleported the upper part of his body next to Buu, and drew penises and insults all over his body. Broly undid his, the world, and time went back in a normal way. Buu kept moving towards Broly, who didn't have the upper half of his body. Buu, by the inertia that had, passed over the legs of Broly, crashing on the ground. When he got up the first thing he saw wasn't Broly, it was his reflection, because Broly had materialized and held a large mirror in front of Buu with his telekinesis. Buu looked at his face in the mirror and was angrier than ever, so much that he didn't know how to put it into words. Ha 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 ha. Besides, Broly's laughter didn't reduce his anger at all, just feed her. Buu without further delay stretched his arm as if it were rubber to hit Broly in the face. Launching energy attacks seemed dangerous, approaching him seemed useless, so this was the idea that came to mind, attacking him at a distance with his body. Buu's Gomu Gomu no Pisturu was about to hit Broly, but he teleported his fist close to his face, and rejected the punch with another one more powerful. However, that wasn't a simple punch. Eh? Ah. What is this? Screamed Buu, something frightened. He realized that his arm was disappearing, as if a green energy was devouring him and advancing towards the rest of his body. Ha 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 ha. Scared? Did you think that just because you could regenerate you were invincible? No matter how tough you are, I created this ability precisely to defeat immortal and indestructible entities, said Broly with arrogance. Buu kept looking terrified as the green energy spread through his elongated arm, as if it were a poison that was advancing in an unstoppable way through the bloodstream. In an act of determination, Buu tore off his arm, so that the devouring energy didn't spread. Then he regenerated as if nothing had happened, while the arm on the ground disappeared. Oh, nothing bad. But how much more can you put up with this strategy? Broly said while teleporting his arms near Buu, hitting his arms and legs, making them disappear. Buu with fear in the eyes detached his arms and legs to make them grow again, to repeat that process once again, dozens of times. Ha 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 ha. What fun, you're like a strawberry gum vending machine, said Broly while attacking Buu's limbs. Uff. Buu was scared, and furious. The immortality of which he has always been proud seemed almost useless with that red monkey child. It was very possible that he would end up disappearing and obviously he was making fun of him. He couldn't take it anymore. I'll turn you into chocolate, Buu said with a terrifying face as he directed his antenna towards Broly, and from here came a strange pink beam, which was heading straight for his enemy, the Transfiguration Beam. The Transfiguration Beam was about to hit Broly, but a few centimeters, something got in the way. It was a huge block of cat chin that became completely chocolate. Oh. Perfect, I'll have candy for months, by the way. Could you make me another white chocolate? Broly said as he took a bite of his giant block of chocolate. Buu was furious at the mockery, but his desperation far outweighed his rage, so he didn't expel smoke through his body and continued to fire his Transfiguration Beam again and again in different ways and directions against Broly. However, everything was useless. Broly was always able to take out blocks of cat chin from the formless realm, materialize them directly or move them with telekinesis to interpose them in the path of his attacks. He was forming tons and tons of chocolate. Hey, can you stop now? There's too much chocolate, and I don't think I can eat it all. Broly said, tearing off pieces of chocolate block near him and eating them. I'll stop when my attack hits you, Buu said as he regenerated his arms and legs again, and kept launching Transfiguration Beams. Broly crossed his arms, well. Then I'll have to let myself be hit to finish this comedy, he said as he faced directly the Transfiguration Beam that Buu had just released. But nevertheless, the Transfiguration Beam hit Broly and enveloped him completely. Majin Buu smiled wickedly, thinking how satisfied he would be after eating him. He was practically licking his lips. Are you satisfied already, little pig? Said Broly, which was perfectly, as if it had never been chocolate or another food product. Waha wayat? Buu shouted, who believed he was living a nightmare. His most characteristic and mystical attack hadn't worked at all. It cannot be true. Ah. Buu desperately threw him several Transfiguration Beams again, but none of them made the slightest effect. It was as if he were immune to everything. Is this all you have? Broly said, yawning as he was illuminated by the pink light of Buu's magic. Buu, with his eyes opened by terror, recoiled on his own steps. He was having the worst nightmare of his life. He couldn't believe that all this was possible. That monster in the form of a child in front of him was too powerful and strange. None of his attacks did anything to him, and he seemed capable of making him disappear despite being practically immortal. Not even fleeing seemed a possible option. He was completely terrified. Buu, understanding this situation, only came up with one thing he could do. Destroy the planet with both inside. Buu, just like Kid Buu did, he created another huge energy sphere and threw it against the ground. The energy sphere was rapidly advancing towards the surface of the planet. In less than a second it would impact, destroying it completely, and Broly seemed not to be moving a muscle to prevent it. Temple of Kami. Kami, lying on the ground again, woke up, and recovered his greenish color, a sign that he was well. What is happening? Cammy asked, trying to get up with the help of Popo. The 1% clone of Broly trying to answer Cammy's question projected the image of what was happening as if it were a movie and said, "Nothing important, that monster is trying to destroy the world with that energy ball." Cammy, who still didn't feel very well, observed that projection, and in turn I verified that this was really happening, to make sure it was not another Broly joke. However, it wasn't a joke. That monster had created an energy sphere with a huge energy, capable of destroying several planets' Earths. And that energy sphere was about to hit the ground, without Broly doing anything to prevent it. It was the apocalypse. "Kami-sama!" Mr. Popo shouted, holding Cammy, who had fainted again. The sphere touched the ground, and when it hit the surface of the planet, nothing happened. There was an impact, but there was no planetary destruction, not even a miserable hole. Nothing happened. How is that possible? Buu muttered, who didn't understand how his suicide attack against a helpless planet had also failed. However, he didn't have time to ask himself more questions or feel more desperate, because a hand went through his head, and the rest of his body disappeared immediately. "I've had a lot of fun, I've got chocolate," check his skills, "and I've also been able to test that my causality invasion works perfectly," said Broly, who appeared behind the now disappeared fat Buu, with his left eye shining with a reddish color. Invasion causality is the ability to impose the laws of causality of the desire realm to other dimensions. The passive ability of this skill was to reduce the effect of a cause, if the causes originated within the area of the formless realm and the effect occurs within the area of the formless realm, depending on the concentration of the formless realm, even nullifying it completely. Although the nullification depends mainly on the concentration and power of the person within the area. With this ability, Broly nullified the effect of turning into chocolate from the transfiguration beam and the destructive effect of the energy sphere. Broly teleported also into formless realm, right where Majin Buu was in a state of stop time with the same frightened face he had before being kidnapped. "Ha ha ha, I finally got the jewel in the crown. I must investigate so much about you. The first thing will be to investigate your memories. You have lived for millions of years and devoured 2 kais, sure you have a lot of interesting information for me," said Broly while holding a defenseless Majin Buu by the head. Broly, using his magical abilities and his authority as master of the 3 realms in combination with his Jugon, began investigating the memories and the interior of Buu to find all his secrets. To satiate his curiosity, he began to investigate what were the origins of this creature, since it changed over the years. At first Majin Buu was a monster created by Bibidi, but years later Akira Toriyama said that Bibidi didn't create Majin Buu, he only how to summon the monster and knew how to control him. But whatever it was, Broly was very interested in his origins. Broly kept investigating until... Moro? Who the hell is Moro? Broly said, puzzled as he continued to investigate Buu's memories. High security jail of the Galactic Patrol. Meanwhile, in a high-security cell separated from the rest of the prisoners, a tall, stooped and grotesque figure in the shape of a goat overflowed with evil, smiled sinisterly. However, these weren't the only events that happened simultaneously and that were destined to meet. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.